I'm sure there's quite a few folks in my audience right now that are scratching their heads wondering why the Florida Maquis didn't immediately go to the camera and begin making a video the moment this happened. Those of you who haven't heard, U.S. seized a Venezuelan tanker. Well, the devil's in the details on this one. And you'd have to be pretty bad at math and pretty unaware of how the oil industry works to think this is anything but showboating. And there's a detail in the video that everybody misses. That, of course, infamous video where they show the helicopters about 3 feet off the deck of the tanker and these guys fast roping. Folks, I can explain this to you in one picture. And this is it. It's because Americans are bad at math. Anybody who thinks this is anything other than showboating proves that they didn't make it past basic algebra in high school. Now, we're going to cover this real quick, though. As always, gratitude first. Thank you, everyone who's continued to join us. Florida Maquis Patreon channel. Got a brand new video up over there. 2-part episode from last year. I think a lot of people need to get read in on PSYOPs, and especially they need to learn how to combat them. When the government runs them, and you read articles and see information, it's almost guaranteed that within a matter of minutes, you're going to get a headache. You're going to experience some form of discomfort. That's because your mind is subconsciously attempting to rectify false information with a subconscious truth that you already know, but you're just not aware of. Now, I know that sounds complicated, but like I said, if you'd like to get read in over there, all of the links are down in the description box. 4 different levels, whatever God puts on your heart. Best part, first 90 days, fully refundable, no questions asked. Now let's get right to it. U.S. seizes oil tanker off coast of Venezuela. Attorney General Pam Bondi has said sanctioned vessel was transporting oil from the South American country and Iran. Now, what they did here is they seized the vessel because it was used allegedly back in 2022 by the Iranians to move oil. Now that they got it off the coast of Venezuela is interesting, but you have to read the details. Now, when you watch this grainy video, I noticed something about this fast roping. And I've watched a lot of guys in the military do this, up close, live. These dudes were moving way too slow. Even for a training exercise, something was just not right. But then I read it in the details. Today, this is a quote from Bondi, Pam Bondi. The Federal Bureau of Investigation, Homeland Security Investigations, and the United States Coast Guard, with support from the Department of War, executed a seizure warrant for a crude oil tanker. The video posted by Bondi shows heavily armed, you ready for this? Military personnel? No. Heavily armed law enforcement officials. See these cats all decked out in military gear? These are FBI guys. These are Homeland Security guys. This is not U.S. military personnel. These are civilians pretending to be military personnel. You see, that's probably why they had to put the choppers down so close to the deck. Because these guys didn't have the skills to fast rope from a normal height. But what does it have to do with Florida Maquis? Okay, what does it have to do with this, though? Well, that's because people are bad at math. You can look this up for yourself. Go ahead, use Google, use Grok, use whatever you want to use. How many barrels of oil does Venezuela produce per day? Venezuela's oil production hovers around 1 million barrels per day. Now, it used to be much, much, much higher. But 1 million barrels a day. The tanker that they seized, if it was maxed out, could hold possibly 2 million barrels. Now, I doubt that it was, because right now Venezuela is putting out between 1 and 2 tankers a day. So those tankers may or may not be full. But here's the math part. 2 million barrels. Let's assume that the tanker was full. 2 million barrels a day, if they're producing 1 million barrels a day, that means how much a year? 365 million barrels a year, right? So you take 2 million and you find out what percentage of their yearly output was seized. And you ready for this? 0.005479. That's right. Those of you that are familiar with math know that this represented 1/2 of 1%. Yes, that's right. It represented only 1/2 of 1% of Venezuela's, even at their lowest level, of their output of oil. And here's the best part, it was heading for Cuba. That's the ridiculous part. It was heading for Cuba. Now, those of you out there are like, well, we can't continue to let the Venezuelans sell oil to the Cubans because then they'll put it on the market and they'll sell it and they'll have more money. How much do you think we pay for Guantanamo Bay? Yes, that's right. You can look that up too. We pay Havana for Guantanamo Bay, the use of the prison. So, a little hypocritical, don't you think? We're handing money over to the Cubans hand over fist, aren't we? Every year for the use of Guantanamo Bay. But the Venezuelans sell one tanker and they seize it, making you believe the U.S. military was involved when it wasn't. There might have been some support as far as like ships in the area monitoring, air traffic. But it was Coast Guard, not that they're not military, I guess, with law enforcement officials on board. Sorry about that. Law enforcement officials on board. Now, here's the real smoking gun. Even the liberals, the progressive liberals, northern liberals at CNN, they want to see Nicolas Maduro gone as much as the Trump administration does. That should send off all sorts of alarm bells for everyone. CNN article, how Venezuelan leader Nicolas Maduro defied all predictions. You read down this article and they rip the guy apart. And how their opposition leader, who lives in hiding, you have to ask yourself a question. If Nicolas Maduro is so unpopular in Venezuela, and the opposition leader is super popular, why does she have to live in hiding and he can walk around open throngs of people perfectly safe all the time? Let me see if I can find that picture. Here you go. Can you imagine any American president posing for any pictures where there were half a dozen heavily armed people around him? These are almost all women, that's why I said her. This ludicrous idea about a socialist government's disarming their people. It's horse crap. It's absolute horse crap. They disarm rebels, and, pardon me, sorry about the voice. They disarm rebels and people that are plotting to kill the leaders of the country, yeah. But it gets even better than this. It truly does. This really highlights psyops in a way that really you cannot explain it anywhere else. This country is $38 trillion in debt. 42 million people, nearly the entire population of Venezuela, actually greater than the entire population of Venezuela in the U.S., are on food stamps. 18 million of those are in starving mode, meaning day-to-day food. Meaning they go to bed at night with no food, hoping tomorrow morning there might be some. To describe our government as irredeemable is being gratuitous. They're horribly and irredeemably corrupt. Half of the U.S. population is obese. We have people controlling our media that make it unwatchable. And we have allegedly 37 genders that we're teaching to prepubescent kids in elementary school. Funny story. In Latin America, as a whole, They have never been confused about gender. Most popular video watched on YouTube. The most popular video, second to Baby Shark, I guess, watched on YouTube by numbers is Despacito. Luis Fonsi. And it's Luis Fonsi and Playboy Playmate of the Year dancing and talking about the attraction between a man and a woman. They're not confused about that. We've covered how the U.S. has gone down the socialist trail a long time ago. And how the U.S. uses, redefining of words and changing standards to deny that they tax, regulate, approve, disapprove, inspect, insure, license, secure, and subsidize people out of their paychecks every day. How many of you remember we tried this? I know the pictures are small, but they are for a reason. Look it up. We tried going into Venezuela and deposing the leader last time Trump was president, and it failed. But here's another question that nobody's asking that you probably need to think about. You see, the U.S. doesn't have nationalized oil, unlike every other major civilized country on the planet. We have corporations that are granted licenses to pump oil, but now the U.S. government has on its hands a tanker full of oil. Which one of these for-profit corporations is the U.S. government going to give this oil to? There's no such thing as U.S. oil. There's no such thing as U.S. oil. Period. The idea about disarmed South Americans, it's a lie. It's psyops. And, Patriot Nurse, I know I talk about her a lot. She's got a lot of great new content out. One of my favorite videos that is a great leaping off point, look for this thumbnail. It says wartime survival. Hot damn. Hot damn. Let's talk about wartime survival in the United States by going back to World War II. And a very specific video she did talking with her now passed on, God rest his soul, grandfather about how they survived during the war. You know how they survived during the war? Socialism. They had to ration shoes. They had to ration food. They created old age pensions. How many of you have done this lately? How many of you have gone to the grocery store and thought, man, every week this is more. Every week this is more. Here's a great picture from 1918, prior to World War II, 1945. In 1918, $1.34 would have bought you 5 pounds of sugar. In 1945, after government socialism was established, that same $1.34 would have bought you that 5 pounds of sugar, a loaf of bread, 6 oranges, 2 quarts of milk, a pound of oatmeal, and a pound of coffee. But we can't have nice things, can we? In the name of capitalism. In the name of capitalism, we can't have the things that make sense. This picture up here is perfect. How the wealthy would go as soon as something would hit the stores and buy it all up. And then back then, sell it on their version of eBay for twice as much. See, back then it didn't matter how rich you were. You only got the one stamp. Didn't matter how much money you had. And it was patriotic to be socialist. It was patriotic because you were taking care of your neighbor. And your neighbor was taking care of you. Buy and hold war bonds. Invest in the U.S. government. Pay willingly our share of taxes. I'll say this again. If there wasn't the IRS, who would pay taxes? That's how much the American people hate the U.S. government. What we call free markets, our grandparents called black markets. because that's what it is. 2 sacks of groceries, $100. That's black markets. That this country has to send anyone to a food pantry when we're avoiding taxing the wealthy, and I mean billionaires, is morally bankrupt. There should be 0 billionaires in the U.S. while there's 1 food pantry open. 0 billionaires in the United States while there is 1 food pantry open. These big supermarkets and banks and oil companies, they are making money hand over fist. And look, even the Patriot Nurse, who's got nearly 500,000 subscribers on YouTube, 500,000, has to use Patreon to get by. And if you don't believe me, go watch a good portion of her latest videos. A lot of them talk about how broke people are, how hard it is to get by. That's her experience right now. I've got about 127, 128. At one time I had 133 or so. It doesn't really make a difference. Way back when I had 30 or 35,000 subscribers, I was making, no lie, probably 90% more. 80 to 90% more than I make on this now. So check out her Patreon. I'm going to ask again, how does Venezuela sailing 1 tanker to Cuba affect the United States? How does that protect us? Stopping that and seizing that. And if you believe that's the case, why are we still paying for Guantanamo Bay in US dollars to the Cuban government? So I will leave it there. Things are not what they seem. They absolutely aren't. And folks, let me give you the analogy on the math for this that might make it make sense. Venezuela's producing 1 million barrels a day. The U.S. seized a tanker that might have 2 million barrels. It represents 0.005%. Let's imagine that you're making $100,000 a year. Let's imagine you're a dad and you've got a teenage daughter and you're clearing $100,000 a year. If your daughter came to you and said, "Dad, oh no, I dented my car. They said it's going to cost $500 to fix. They're going to charge me $500 to pull out this dent." If you are clearing $1,000 a week, no, excuse me, $2,000. If you're clearing $100,000, which is $2,000 a week, roughly, and you can't absorb a $500 punch, you're doing it wrong. You're doing it wrong. If you're clearing $2,000 a week, which is about $100,000 a year, and your kid comes to you with an unexpected $500 expense, you're doing it wrong. Trust me when I tell you that the Venezuelans, let's find the picture, can absorb a $500 hit on $100,000 a year, or 2 million barrels of oil versus the 365 million that they are producing every year. So I'll leave it there. Pardon me. God bless. Pray for each other. Pray for me. I'll pray for you. And pray for the Patriot Nurse. Check out her videos. Tell me where I'm wrong. Lift each other up. Like, share, subscribe. I'll see you guys next time.